Why are some business owners just so lucky while others just continuously struggle? They're just very, very good at using risk. You can make more money by knowing how to use risk, and your money can make you more money by knowing how to use risk. Hey, business owners, welcome back to the podcast. And oh my God, do I have a doozy for you guys today. I am very excited for this episode because I had a client ask a question. She was very emotionally activated at the moment. She was feeling very defeated. She just had a flopped launch and she, feels like her business isn't working and da 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 da. And then the heat of the moment, she goes, why are some business owners just so lucky and I'm not? Like, why is it that some of them win and some of them don't? And I really sat with that question because it's not an unfounded question, right? Why is it that some business owners just seem to succeed while others just continuously struggle? And my answer to that comes down to risk. The business owners that you think are just naturally lucky are not naturally lucky. They're just very, very good at using risk. Risk is this thing that we have an interesting relationship with as a society. And there's like gender layers involved here. There's so many different layers, but risk can be seen as risky, right? Don't be too risky. You might lose everything, or don't be too safe, right? It seems to be that there is this like sweet spot of risk that we're all supposed to be in, that it's not supposed to be too risky, but it's not supposed to be too safe. And we're all just supposed to somehow know what that sweet spot is. So I wanted to come on today and just kind of walk through how to use risk as a wealth tool. And when I say wealth tool, I mean in two senses. Number one, in terms of your income. Can you generate more monthly cash flow by using risk well? The answer is yes, by the way. And then number two, can you have that cash flow that you earned? Can you have the money that you have make you more money by using risk? The answer is also yes. You can make more money by knowing how to use risk, and your money can make you more money by knowing how to use risk. So it's really a 2-for-1 deal in here. All right. But first, I love a definition. I love actually sitting with the definitions of words. So let's actually define what is risk. Risk quantifies the uncertainty around the ROI, return on investment, and the chance that things might turn out worse than expected. Okay, so let's break that down. It quantifies the uncertainty around the ROI. So essentially, the higher the risk, the less certain the return on investment. The lower the risk, the more certain the return on investment. And the chance that things might turn out worse than expected. The more risk, the higher the chance things may turn out worse than you wanted or expected. But I really think about this in terms of like a graph, because risk is a double-edged sword. So here we have on the x-axis is probably time, and on the y-axis we have, positive return on investment, negative return on investment, and then we have zero here in the middle, meaning I broke even on that investment. And an investment can be in anything, right? It can be a money investment or a time investment. So I want to think about what is the likelihood that I make a positive return on investment on this risk? And what is the likelihood that I make a negative return on investment on this risk? So how I think about this is in terms of actually like a funnel. If we look at something that's very high risk, it probably looks like this. And by the way, if you're listening on a traditional podcast platform that doesn't have video, you can come over to YouTube. The link will be in the show notes, or Spotify to watch the video so you can see what I'm drawing out. But here's like a traditional funnel, right? When we have very, very high risk, there is a high potential for a positive return on investment. And there is an equally high potential on the negative return on investment. It's kind of like every action has an equal and opposite reaction, right? We have the high potential for really big upside, and we have the high potential for a really big downside. That means it is high risk. On the other hand, though, if we're very risk adverse and we don't want to take a lot of risks at all, our graphs probably look like this. I don't have as much potential upside. I will never have as much potential upside, but I also don't have as much potential downside, right? In the high risk investment, I have a lot of potential upside and a lot of potential downside. So what we have to understand through this graph is that risk is not bad. There's a lot of connotations like, oh, don't be risky. Taking risks is bad. Risk is not bad. Or rather, high risk is not bad. And low risk is not good. Why? High risk isn't bad because you have the potential for such a high upside. Low risk is not good because you don't have as much potential for upside, right? If you continue to be low risk forever, you will never make the money that the big dogs make. That's just how it works. Like point blank, period. End of discussion. If you're not willing to risk the loss, you will never get the gain. But on the other side, if you are only ever taking high risk bets, one bad bet could take you out. So how are wealthy business owners, how are those lucky business owners using risk appropriately? I'm sure there's lots of different perspectives on this topic, but I want to share how I use risk. And I will say, I'm not the biggest dog out there by any means, but I have doubled my revenue almost every single year since I've been in business. So it's working out for me is what I will say. So how are we using risk as a tool? The first thing that you're going to do as a wealthy business owner is you're going to make a contingency plan for the worst case scenario. You're going to look at the bottom of the graph. You're going to say, okay, I'm taking a big risk, which has a big potential upside, but the downside is all the way down here. What you're going to do is you're going to make a contingency plan for the absolute worst case scenario. And this is going to obviously be dependent on whatever it is that you invest in or whatever it is that you're doing, whatever risk you're taking. Let me give you an example. Let's say I recently spoke to like a pond scum cleaning company. They go around and they clean pond scum. And they said that their first year in business, they rented the machinery, but it cost $6,500 a month to rent. So that was eating into their profit. And this year they decided to buy a machine, but it's $80,000 to buy the machine outright. And they didn't take on any debt, so they paid for it in cash, but they spent $80,000. So what I would do in that scenario is I'm going to say, before I even spend the money, or even if I have to get a loan, before I do anything, I'm going to say, what is the worst thing that could happen after I buy this machine? In that scenario, I think the obvious worst case scenario is I buy this machine and then all of my business dries up. That's a worst case scenario. Another worst case scenario, I buy this machine and then it breaks, right? And then it just it's decommissioned. A boulder falls on it and it's out of commission. What is the absolute worst case scenario? Lucky business owners, wealthy business owners, before they take on the risk, are sitting down and they're putting together their contingency plan. And a contingency plan is really simple. It's a piece of paper that says, if this happens, I will do Y. If I buy this piece of machinery and then something changes in the economy or changes in the landscape and all of my business dries up, I will do Y. This is especially important. I even think the machinery example is a good example for not even being that high risk because they bought the machine in cash. But let's say you bought the machine on credit, right? You went into debt. The question you have to answer is, how am I going to pay the bill, even if all my business dries up? And really what you kind of want to say, and this is where the most basic thing comes in. This is where savings comes in. Do you have the savings to float yourself during the worst case scenario? If the answer is no, you need to have a plan to build the savings. That's it. Okay. Same can be said for a personal expense. Let's say you're a business owner and you're about to take on the risk of buying a home. It's a risk because you're going to sign a mortgage and you're going to get a 30-year loan. The risk there is that your business dries up or you get, really, really sick and you can't work or whatever might happen and you don't have an income. Again, it kind of just goes back to savings. Contingency plans for the most part are just savings. How are you going to cover the expenses in the worst case scenario? Now you're going to sit down and write your contingency plan. And it can be like an order of operations. Like first, I'm going to use my savings in my business. Then if those run out, then I'm going to use some credit to pay the bills in the meantime. Maybe there's even like I'm going to sell the machine. At a certain point, it makes sense to sell the machine for a loss, or whatever it is. You're going to create your list of order of operations. How am I going to fund things if everything blows up in my face? Then, and this is very, very important, you're going to put that piece of paper aside. You're going to move forward with the decision of the risk. And then you're never going to think about the worst case scenario again. That is the difference between a lucky business owner who just seems to get everything right and an unlucky business owner. The unlucky business owner is probably still going into the risk, but they probably haven't created a contingency plan. And in the back of their mind, they are constantly worrying about the worst case scenario. What does that do? If you are constantly worrying about the worst case scenario, you are expending energy on something that doesn't make you more money. It doesn't actually make you more money to worry. And I know that may sound a little bit infantilizing or, Gina, I can't help that I worry. I want you to actually sit and think about this though. Your job is to take a risk, have the contingency plan, and then throw everything against the best case scenario. That's what we want to do. Let's go back to this graph, right? I want to know if shit hits the fan, here's what I'm going to do. And then I never want to think about this again so that I can focus on, okay, but now how do I maximize my return on investment? How can I get the most out of this risk without spending energy worrying about what might happen? You have a contingency plan for what might happen. That's why we made it at the beginning, before you're in it, right? Because once you're in it, it can be really hard to be objective about what's going on. It can be really easy to be affected by all the incoming circumstances. So that's why we do the contingency plan beforehand. But then when you're in it, it's your job to focus on, okay, now how can I push this to the max? That is the difference. Now, the second or third at this point rule of using risk well is you don't want to layer too many risks on top of each other at once. So let's go with the machinery example, right? You buy the $80,000 machine to clean the ponds, but then you're also, we don't want to also then layer in, and I'm going to hire a crew of 20 when we've historically been a crew of 5, and I'm going to get a loan to invest in advertising and. So you want to be strategic about how many risks you're taking at once, because really what you want to say, going back to the contingency plan, is what if they all fell to shit at once? Can you afford for each one of these individual risks to fall to shit at once? If the answer is yes, I can absorb all of that. Amazing. Go ahead and continue. But even then, the next question is, do you have the capacity to push for the upside on every single risk at once? Because it's not just about, the contingency plan for the downside. It's also about you need to then use all your energy, mental, creative, emotional energy, to get the most ROI. Can you do that across 5 different risks at once? Again, if the answer is yes, I absolutely have capacity to push for that. Cool, amazing. But if the answer is, oh, no, I can't possibly have the capacity to push for getting the most on the machine and figuring out a whole new marketing channel and figuring out how to manage a team of 20 when I've only managed a team of 5 in the past. So maybe pick one, right? Pick what you can afford. pick the downside you can afford, and pick what capacity you can do for the upside. Now, the opposite can be said for only taking low risk bets. Remember, low risk is there is a low chance that you're going to make a big return on investment, but there's also a low chance that you're going to lose a lot of money. If your whole life and business is low risk, you won't be wealthy, most likely. Like, that just is not how it works. You can't risk nothing to get everything. That's not in my hands. That's out of my hands. That's a law of physics or something, right? So you don't also want to just go along making the tiniest little bets and then thinking somehow that all that's going to add up to a big, big, big wealthy life and business. And by the way, it's okay if you don't want a big, big, big wealthy life and business to just continue to take small risks that have a high likelihood of paying off to a small degree. But if you do want a big, big, big life and business, which you probably do if you're listening to this podcast, then this is the skill we're going to have to learn. And the thing that I notice, especially with my clients, is most of the time my clients are risk takers. Like, you guys are happy to take risk, but a lot of you don't have the contingency plan in place. So if it blows up, it blows up big. And that's where that financial acumen comes in. That's where savings come in. It's so basic, but it all comes back to savings. I have taken big risks that have paid off big because I have savings. You know, a couple of years ago, I invested in a $15,000 mastermind to teach me how to launch. And at the time, I didn't have the money in my business bank account. So I put it on a credit card, but I did have my contingency plan was, you know, I have mapped out the next 6 months of my cash and I'll be able to make payments on the credit card. So that was my contingency plan. And then my contingency plan is if it all blew up, well, I have $15,000 in my personal finances. I could pay off the credit card if I needed. So I took a risk, right? I didn't know if it was going to pay off, but it could have the potential to pay off big. And the downside is the potential is I lose out on $15,000 plus interest. So I had the contingency plan. And then my very first launch, 6 weeks into the program, made me $60,000. And then by the end of that year, through launching, I had made over $500,000 through launching for the risk of the $15,000 plus interest. So I was prepared, and then I never thought about the credit card again. I focused all my energy on implementing everything I was learning to the max. But that was kind of the big risk of the year. I didn't layer a ton of risks on top of that. I didn't like restructure my whole team or hire a bunch of people or spend a ton of money on ads. I focused in on that one risk that I was taking. This year, I'm ramping up my ad spend. I have spent in 6 weeks over $45,000 on ads. And the risk is that I lose all $45,000 and I don't make a dime. And the possible return is that I make a ton of money back. And guess what? I've made over $170,000 back on the $41,000 investment. But again, I am pouring my energy into that risk. That is the risk that I am taking at this time. I'm actually going to be layering in a couple more risks this year, which is very exciting to be having my capacity be tested and grow. How can I manage multiple risks at once? But going back to the contingency plan, I have a plan in place in case everything falls to shit. I can literally absorb every risk I'm taking this year not working. And then they are. It's kind of a catch-22, right? It's like, I need to take the risk to grow my money, but I need the money to make sure if the risk blows up, I don't lose everything. And so what that's going to mean is, at least for me, in the beginning, in 2020 and 2021 and 2022, my risks were much smaller than they are today. This is also why, like, I'm not an advocate for just dumping money into a business. I am an advocate for slowly and steadily increasing the risk over time. So, you know, when I first started my business, I risked $3,000 on a 6-month coaching container. And the risk was that I lost the $3,000, which again, I could absorb at that time. And in return, I think I made like $10,000. It wasn't a great investment. I wouldn't probably like recommend that person, but you know, it was what I could afford at the time and it helped me get started. And then slowly, I've increased the quantification of the risk to the point where now I'm spending crazy money that in 2020 I would have never dreamed of spending on stuff that I would have never dreamed of doing. In conclusion, if you want to be a very wealthy, successful business owner, you're going to have to learn how to do this. You're going to have a contingency plan in place for the downside. You're going to have to put that contingency plan aside and manage your mind to not be ruminating on the worst case scenario for the next 6 months. And then you're going to have to pour all your energy into getting the biggest upside that you can. The second thing you have to remember is that you should be very careful about sequencing your risks. You don't want to layer too many risks at once, because you should assume that all the risks you're taking could blow up at the same time. And then you have to ask yourself, can I afford that? On the flip side, you have to ask yourself, do I have the capacity to give my all to every single one of the risks that I'm doing right now so that I can maximize the return on investment? And then remember that if you never take any risks at all, you're never going to win any big prizes. I hope this was helpful, maybe a little bit inspiring. I think that it's such a fun concept because it's just another, it just goes to show this is all in your capability. You can do this. You can be wealthy as a business owner because you have the ability to say, I'm going to take that risk and I'm going to give my all. And you know what? I've had my fair share of L's along the way. Not every single one of my risks pans out. Oh no. But you are in control of what you do compared to just being a 9-to-5er where, you work for a job and you maybe get a promotion and you maybe get a raise here and there and you maybe get laid off, right? I really believe that entrepreneurship is the best way to build wealth because of this, because you're in control of your money, but you have to take control of your money to be in control of your money. All right. I'll catch you guys in the next episode. Take it easy.